During the height of the Cold War, when nations fought battles not just on the ground, but in the shadows of scientific ambition, morality often became the first casualty. In an era of secrecy and desperation, one alleged experiment stands out, not for its breakthroughs, but for the horror it unleashed. This is the story of the Kryptos sleep experiment, a sinister attempt to push the boundaries of human endurance with consequences that defy explanation. The Kryptos sleep experiment was allegedly conducted in the early 1960s under a veil of secrecy, blending pseudoscience with psychological warfare. According to fragmented accounts, it aimed to test the effects of extreme sleep deprivation on the human psyche. Some say the goal was to create the perfect soldier, one immune to fatigue, operating indefinitely without rest. Others suggest more sinister motives: control, manipulation, and unlocking the true limits of the mind. The details are murky, a mix of declassified files and chilling accounts from anonymous sources. Some documents hint at facilities buried deep in remote locations, while conspiracy theorists claim survivors, or victims, of the experiment leaked stories too horrifying to ignore. Fact or fiction, the Kryptos sleep experiment leaves behind a lingering question. What happens when the need for sleep is stripped away? The Cold War was a time of quiet desperation and loud paranoia. In the mid-20th century, the world was caught between the titanic powers of the United States and the Soviet Union. It wasn't just a battle of bombs and missiles. It was a race to control the mind, the ultimate weapon. Governments sought any edge they could find, delving into areas science barely understood and morality dared not tread. In the shadows of this geopolitical chessboard, ethical lines blurred. Both sides conducted bizarre and horrific experiments in their quest for dominance. The CIA's infamous MK-Ultra program, for example, tested mind control techniques through the use of drugs, hypnosis, and psychological torture. Across the Iron Curtain, Soviet scientists explored the boundaries of sleep and deprivation, allegedly forcing subjects to stay awake for weeks to observe their mental collapse. These weren't isolated cases. They were glimpses into an era where the pursuit of superiority justified unspeakable acts. Among these chilling undertakings lies the enigma of the Kryptos sleep experiment. Kryptos, as whispered in conspiracy circles, was no ordinary project. Allegedly, it was a clandestine division operating within a larger Cold War intelligence program, tasked with unraveling the secrets of the human mind. Unlike MK-Ultra, which left a paper trail of damning evidence, Kryptos was a phantom, existing only in fragments of testimony and incomplete records. What little is known paints a chilling picture. The Kryptos group focused on sleep, or more accurately, the deprivation of it. Sleep wasn't just a biological necessity. To Kryptos, it was an obstacle to sever the brain's dependency on rest, unlocking hidden cognitive potential, or creating a soldier immune to the frailties of exhaustion and fear. But Kryptos wasn't satisfied with surface-level science. Their methods allegedly went beyond monitoring sleepless nights in sterile labs. Rumors suggest subjects were kept in complete isolation, subjected to sensory manipulation, and bombarded with incomprehensible audio frequencies designed to scramble their sense of time. While these claims remain unverified, they echo the grim reality of the era. If the means could serve the end, no measure was too extreme. The Cold War may have ended, but whispers of Kryptos linger like an unsettling memory, an echo from a time when humanity's greatest fear was itself. The purpose of the Kryptos sleep study was as chilling as it was ambitious. On the surface, the aim seemed almost clinical, to explore the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation on human cognition, behavior, and susceptibility to manipulation. But beneath this cold facade, darker theories swirled. Was this truly a study for scientific advancement, or was it something more sinister? There are some that speculate that the experiment was designed to break the mind of the enemy, to build a soldier immune to exhaustion and fear. a soldier who could fight endlessly. Others suggest a more disturbing purpose, to perfect the art of interrogation, using sleep deprivation as a tool to manipulate and control the human mind. Imagine a prisoner, already worn down by days of sleeplessness, their resistance weakening with each passing hour. Under such conditions, even the strongest would be vulnerable to suggestion, to control. The possibilities seemed endless, and the motivations terrifying. The participants in the study were not volunteers eager to participate in a groundbreaking experiment. Instead, they were often unwilling subjects, prisoners, war captives, or perhaps even civilians, people who had been selected without their consent. Some accounts suggest that many were unaware of the true nature of the experiment they were entering. They were promised something else, perhaps a chance at redemption, or simply survival. But none knew they would be trapped in the nightmare that was about to unfold. Once inside the experiment's grasp, these subjects were kept in complete isolation. There was no comfort, no human connection, just the sterile, artificial environment of the experiment itself. They were monitored constantly, their every movement recorded, their every word analyzed. The isolation was total. No communication with the outside world, no understanding of how long they had been confined to the sealed chambers. Time itself became an abstract concept, one that slowly unraveled their mind. The setup of the study was as eerie as the experiment itself. The subjects were placed in small, windowless rooms with metallic walls that hummed faintly with the sound of machinery, keeping an ever-present tension in the air. The walls were lined with surveillance cameras that tracked their every movement, the cold lenses glinting in the harsh, artificial light that bathed the room day and night. The light was a constant presence, bright, unyielding, designed not only to keep the subjects awake, but to rob them of any sense of time. The passage of hours, days, or even weeks was impossible to track. The subjects had no idea when the night fell, or when it rose again. There was no dawn to look forward to, no night to offer respite. There was only the unrelenting light, pushing their bodies and minds further into the abyss of exhaustion. The methods used to keep the participants awake were as varied as they were cruel. The researchers had no intention of allowing them to sleep, not even for a few moments. Constant auditory stimulation filled the room. Repetitive, jarring sounds that assaulted their senses, disrupting any chance of peace. The noises were designed to break down their resistance, pushing them to the edge of their sanity. If that wasn't enough, participants were forced to remain active. Movement was required, simple tasks designed to keep the body from resting. At first, it seemed like a mild inconvenience, but as the days dragged on, it became a cruel torment. There was no time to sit, no time to lay down, no time for the body to slow. Every movement was an attempt to stave off collapse, but with every moment, the exhaustion only deepened. To ensure that sleep would remain an impossibility, stimulants were administered, drugs designed to keep the body awake, to prevent it from slipping into the natural cycles of rest. The subjects were never given a reprieve. Their bodies were forced to keep going, even as their minds crumbled under the pressure. They were no longer human beings, but experiments in the purest sense. Living, breathing test subjects in a study where the cost of knowledge was the destruction of the mind itself. The isolation, the lights, the sounds, the chemicals, it all combined to create an atmosphere of relentless tension. The subjects, disconnected from reality, began to lose their grip on their sense of self. The longer they stayed awake, the harder it became to separate dream from reality. In this dark world, the Kryptos researchers watched, hidden behind their cameras, taking notes as the minds of their subjects slowly fractured. In the first few days of the Kryptos sleep experiment, the effects of prolonged wakefulness were subtle but unmistakable. The subjects, deprived of sleep and subjected to the unnerving atmosphere of the sealed chambers, began to show signs of distress. It started with irritability, small things setting them off, a sharpness to their words. Their moods were erratic, shifting from anger to anxiety, then back to moments of cold, calculated silence. Paranoia set in like a creeping fog, clouding their minds and turning every sound, every shadow, into something ominous. They began to distrust each other, unsure of who was real and who was a figment of their fractured perceptions. Even the staff observing them felt the weight of their growing instability, but there was no escape for the subjects. There was only the ever-present hum of machinery and the cold, unyielding light. As the days stretched on, the effects deepened. The participants' mental state deteriorated rapidly, their cognition slipping further with each hour. They began seeing things, figures moving just out of sight, voices whispering from the corners of the room. The line between reality and hallucination blurred. Some reported seeing familiar faces that weren't there. Others swore they could hear the soft murmur of a conversation in a language they didn't understand. The hallucinations were different for everyone, but they all shared one terrifying trait. They felt incredibly real. The psychological toll became even more apparent as the subjects began to break down. Speech became nonsensical, disconnected from reality, as though their minds were no longer capable of forming coherent thoughts. Words tumbled out in incoherent strings, their meaning lost to the madness. Extreme aggression manifested in fits of rage as participants lashed out at each other, at themselves, or at the unseen forces they believed to be watching them. They no longer understood the rules of the experiment. They only knew that they were trapped, suffocating under the weight of their own exhaustion. It wasn't long before the true breaking point was reached. Reports from those who claimed to have knowledge of the experiment tell of a subject deep into the deprivation who became convinced they were being watched. Not by the researchers, but by entities. These figures were not human. The participant described them as otherworldly presences, watching from the corners of the room, from the walls, from the very air itself. They were linked to the subject's lack of sleep, the mind reaching beyond its limits, encountering things no one else could see. Some speculated that these entities were a result of the mind's collapse under extreme deprivation, but others whispered that they were something more sinister, beings that existed beyond the threshold of reality, lurking in the space between wakefulness and sleep. As the experiment stretched beyond the limits of sanity, the violence escalated. One chilling account suggests that the researchers had to intervene when the subjects, no longer able to distinguish friend from foe, turned violent. Some became aggressive toward the staff, while others turned on themselves, desperate to escape the torment they could no longer endure. The atmosphere in the facility was thick with fear, with the unsettling realization that something had gone terribly wrong. The researchers who had initially observed with clinical detachment now found themselves in a desperate struggle to contain the chaos they had unleashed. But it was too late. The experiment had spiraled beyond their control. In the final days of the experiment, one of the remaining participants was reported to have muttered something chilling before losing consciousness. "We are the ones who watch in the dark," they allegedly said, their voice trembling but certain. The words were incomprehensible to those present, but they sent a chill through the room. Who, or what, was watching in the dark? Were the subjects now the ones observing, no longer human but something else entirely? Or had they been transformed by the darkness they had endured? The crypto-sleep experiment ended abruptly, leaving behind only the echoes of madness and the question of what truly happened in those sealed chambers. The details were buried in secrecy, locked away behind layers of government confidentiality. But the chilling reports, the rumors, the whispers, those remained, fueling a growing mystery that would never be fully explained. What had they unleashed, and exactly what had it done to the minds of those who survived? When the crypto-sleep experiment was abruptly ended, the unsettling silence that followed only fueled the growing rumors and speculation. Allegedly, all records of the experiment, Files, recordings, notes were destroyed or hidden, locked away by those who feared the consequences of revealing the truth. There were whispers that the government, desperate to avoid public outrage and the fallout of exposing such a disturbing project, had erased any trace of crypto's existence. Whether through fire or shredder, the evidence was said to have been wiped clean. The files, if they had ever truly existed, became part of a conspiracy theory of their own, one that would torment minds long after the experiment was over. Some of the more fantastical theories suggested that the crypto's sleep experiment had unearthed something far beyond human comprehension, a terrifying possibility that the experiment had opened a gateway, a rift to another dimension perhaps, or an unseen realm that could be accessed when the mind was pushed beyond its limits. The participants, broken by days of sleeplessness, may have glimpsed things no human was meant to witness. Otherworldly entities, alternate realities, or hidden truths buried deep within the recesses of the mind. These theories proposed that the experiment's ultimate failure was not in breaking the subjects, but in unlocking something that could never be controlled again. Could these so-called entities the subjects saw have been real? Was the mind capable of opening windows to dimensions beyond our own? Simply through the extreme deprivation of sleep, the speculation runs deep and dark, with the question of whether cryptos uncovered something truly monstrous. However, not everyone is willing to accept the more supernatural theories. Skeptics argue that the whole story is simply a product of Cold War paranoia, nothing more than a ghost story, a fabrication born from the fear and secrecy that defined the era. They point to the lack of concrete evidence, the absence of verified documents, and the similarities to fictional accounts like the Russian sleep experiment creepypasta, a dark tale that has circulated online and captivated many with its terrifying narrative. The skeptics claim that the tale of cryptos may have simply been inspired by these stories, an urban legend brought to life through the fevered imaginations of those who lived in a time of extreme uncertainty. Whether truth or fiction, the eerie legacy of the crypto's sleep experiment remains locked in the murky waters of speculation. Some believe it revealed hidden corners of the human mind. Others insist it was simply the result of a government gone mad with power. But one thing is clear. The chilling aftermath of the experiment, whether real or imagined, continues to haunt us, reminding us of the dangerous edge where science and madness can collide. The crypto's sleep experiment, whether real or imagined, continues to cast a long, terrifying shadow. Its chilling tale has inspired countless discussions, not only in underground circles, but also within mainstream pop culture. Books, movies, and documentaries have drawn heavily from the concept of sleep deprivation experiments gone horribly wrong. The eerie, inescapable isolation of the subjects, the blurring of reality with hallucinations, and the concept of entities lurking just beyond the edge of consciousness have all found their way into stories that continue to terrify. The notion of science, unchecked by morality, venturing too far into dangerous territory, resonates deeply with our collective fears. Fears that our boundaries, both psychological and physical, might one day be tested in ways that we can never undo. From dystopian thrillers to psychological horrors, the cryptos narrative seems to haunt more than just the dark corners of conspiracy theorists' minds. It's become a universal symbol of what can happen when the pursuit of knowledge becomes more important than the preservation of humanity. This legend has become more than just a terrifying story. It's a mirror reflecting the dark potential of science and of those who would wield it without conscience. The public's fascination with such stories, whether about sleep deprivation, mind control experiments, or forbidden knowledge, speaks to our deep-seated fear of where unchecked scientific progress might lead. It forces us to ask, what happens when we push too far? When curiosity and power overshadow ethics and human compassion? The horrifying possibilities remain present, lingering in the back of our minds like shadows in the dark. Could we be next? Could our own governments under the guise of research, be conducting experiments that will someday be uncovered, leaving behind a legacy of fear for generations to come? The mystery of the crypto sleep experiment challenges us to confront these questions in ways that are deeply unsettling. It leaves us wondering, what lengths will some go to for the sake of knowledge? How much suffering are we willing to endure to unlock the deepest, darkest secrets of the human mind? And most chillingly of all, what happens when we reach the point of no return, where science itself may have gone too far? We are left with the question that echoes through time. Is the crypto sleep experiment a warning from history, or simply a legend born from our darkest fears? Was it a government program gone horribly wrong, or an urban myth crafted from the panic of an era? We may never know the full truth, but the mystery remains, haunting us as we ask ourselves what boundaries are too dangerous to cross. Could there be truth behind the tale of the crypto sleep experiment, or is it merely a story twisted from our deepest anxieties? Share your theories and thoughts in the comments below. Let's dive into this dark mystery together.